समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme related documents carefully.
Peter Navarro is back and arrives, and how? He is now Trump's Medvedev. Somebody called him, and I think that is a very good description. Just as Putin uses Medvedev to get under Trump's skin, and Trump starts responding to him, Trump is using Peter Navarro, supposedly his senior counselor for trade and manufacturing. He's using him to get under India's skin. However, India is not officially responding. Indian Prime Minister does not respond to other people on Twitter, and that's a wise thing to do. That is a very Trump specialization, and that's the reason Putin has Medvedev just for that job, just to rile up Trump and get reactions out of him. Peter Navarro, what has he done? He is now such an interesting figure that we dedicated a full episode to him just 10 days back. I will again share a link with you. You can see that. And we told you more about his life, where he's come from, what he's done, how he has risen to such key position around Trump, what makes him tick, etc., etc., and all the U-turns he's made in his own life. All that's not relevant right now. What is relevant now and what's brought him back in our lives is this series of tweets that he wrote. These tweets, they will run on your screen, and as I'm speaking, you will see 8 of them, one after the other, they will run. I will give you some iteration of these, and then also the facts and data. And I will then give you some facts and data as we go along, because you know what, it's the old line, in God we trust, the rest of you bring data. So we've got data on this. I will talk about that. However, remember, if Peter Navarro is doing this, it doesn't necessarily mean that he believes in this, because he's not somebody who necessarily needs the facts to make his case. He's an attack dog, Trump's attack dog in this case, just as Medvedev might be Putin's attack dog. This is no insult to any humans or any dogs. Attack dog is a metaphor. You can use it like that somebody is dogging your step, or somebody has a dogged determination. It's just a metaphor. However, a dog may attack you. A dog may attack you for whatever motive. Can be fear, can be greed, can be at the direction of somebody. Somebody can tell a master can tell a dog to attack somebody. All of that's fine. But when a dog attacks you, the dog doesn't tell a lie. In Navarro's case, however, lying is actually an old habit, so much so that he wrote a bunch of books. He's written many books in his life. He wrote a bunch of books making his case on his view of economics, where he kept on quoting an economist, a noted economist, a famous economist called Ron Vara, Ronvara, Ron Vara. Later, it turned out that it was a made-up name. No such economist existed. No economist called Ron Vara existed. And what is Ron Vara but an anagram of Navarro? So he was just playing this game with the rest of the world. So he's not somebody to be confused with facts, because he's made his case and he's totally convinced of his case, and he comes at you with a sense of outrage, sense of holy outrage in this case. If you see these tweets, for example, see the first one. President Trump's 50% tariffs on Indian imports are now in effect. This isn't just about India's unfair trade. It's about cutting off the financial lifeline India has extended to Putin's war machine. Now, the fact is that he goes on to say, then, you can see the next tweets, and the first one has an AI image of Donald Trump with the gavel of a judge, right, giving an order for tariffs, looking very powerful, exuding power, AI image, right? And then he says, see how India's system works, and see the graphic that he has made. And actually, we should all be happy and thank him for being the one key foreigner and that too one in official capacity in the US, to use the correct map of India. Correct map of India, go to the top, see the entire Kashmir, Ladakh region. So at least for that, you have to say, Ron Navarro, you got your facts right, right? He makes that graphic to tell you what's his case. His case is that India puts high tariffs on American goods. So American manufacturers are not able to sell to India as much as India is able to sell to America. In the process, India builds a trade surplus with America, which is about $50 billion. These days it's about 40 billion, but he says 50 billion. All right, what's 10 billion between friends? Because US and India are friends. Then he says India uses that money to buy crude oil, discounted crude oil from Russia. That discounted crude oil is then refined by India's refineries, which is run by India's politically connected oil businesses, who then benefit from this. He says they then refine that crude oil and sell it to the world at a very high profit because they are getting the crude discounted from the Russians. And he says of the 1.5 million barrels on an average a day that India imports, about 1 billion is refined like this and is exported overseas. So he uses three expressions about India which stand out in these tweets. So he says India's big oil lobby has turned India into a massive refining hub and a laundromat for discounted Russian crude. Now, this has to pass the test of facts, which means have India's crude imports really gone up so extraordinarily since the war in Ukraine started, that if India needed, say, 100x before that for its own needs and its own exports until the war started, today it's gone to 200x or 150x. One will be that test. Second, have India's exports gone up accordingly? So if India was exporting, say, 10x in terms of refined petroleum goods in the past, is it now post the war, post 2022-23 onwards, is it now exporting, say, 20x or 18x? Then you can say that this is because India has the opportunity to refine and sell overseas. There is cheaper crude available. India has got spare refining capacity, so they are quickly buying this stuff and profiteering from it. All of that has to stand the test of facts. So if I may repeat Peter Navarro's language, Indian refiners, and this is the third tweet, Indian refiners with their silent Russian partners, who these are, I don't know, refine and flip the black market oil for big profits. If you say black market oil, that means the oil has to be sanctioned to begin with. The fact is Russian oil is not sanctioned. Venezuelan oil is sanctioned. Iranian oil is sanctioned. That has a black market. Russian crude oil is sold legitimately, legally, as per the rules laid down by G7 and EU under a certain price cap. That's all. Otherwise, there is no black market of Russian crude. And he says India refines and flips the black market oil for big profits on the international market, while Russia pockets hard currency to fund its war on Ukraine. Then he says, of course, that India's import of Russian crude has gone up, which is correct. But it's also true that it's the US and Europe, but more US than Europe, that requested India to buy Russian crude, because Russia supplies about 10% of the entire crude requirement in the world, crude supply in the world. And everybody realized that if this 10% goes out of the market, then the global oil prices will go up. They could have gone up to maybe $200 a barrel at one point. Today, they might go up to $90, $100 a barrel, which will be bad for everybody. So Janet Yellen, who was then Secretary of the Treasury, she actually showed appreciation. She appreciated India's role for buying up these crude oil supplies from Russia to stabilize the global oil prices. However, when it comes to Trump administration, if you say that Biden administration advised us to do this, or Janet Yellen actually endorsed it and she's now spoken out on this again, all of that is like waving a red rag to the Trump administration bull, because they don't want to be reminded of what Biden administration did. Because if you go on reading Peter Navarro, he doesn't confine himself to crude oil. He also comes to weapons purchases, and he's complaining about India's weapons purchases from Russia. He says in his 8th tweet, "It doesn't stop here. India continues to buy Russian weapons while demanding that US firms transfer sensitive military technology and build plants in India." That is strategic freeloading. And see, Biden again. The Biden administration largely looked the other way at this madness. President Trump is confronting it. And then he goes on to say, if India, the world's largest democracy, wants to be treated as America's strategic partner, it needs to act like one. The road to peace in Ukraine runs through Delhi. That's really a rhetorical flourish, because in any case, China buys a lot more of the Russian crude than India does. So the road to peace in Ukraine maybe runs through Beijing, but not through India. Nevertheless, that's the point. That's the point he has made. Now let's look at some data and let's look at some facts. First of all, let's look at the oil business. If you see this graphic and this table, you can see that India's nominal economic growth is upwards of 10-12%. So you would expect that India's oil consumption, energy consumption should also go up by that much. In any case, India's net economic growth has been upwards of 6.5% through this period. So you would expect India's energy consumption also to go up accordingly. In 2019-20, in the year preceding the first wave of COVID, India's crude oil imports are, all the figures in this case are in million metric tons, MMTs. 220.87, I'm rounding it off, 221 million metric tons. In 2021, obviously because of the lockdown, the first wave of the pandemic, it came down to 188, and then 21-22 went up to 220, right? So back to where it was. Meanwhile, India's economy is growing. And India got that 1 year of 9%, nearly 9.8% growth. So India's economy is now recovering big time from the pandemic, and accordingly, energy requirement is also going up. So next year, while India's economy in any case is growing average about 6.5%, forget 1 year's bump, it has gone up to 236 million metric tons, which means a growth of less than 6%. So this is well within the normal. 22-23, as we know, is the first year of the Ukraine war. So there's been no abnormal increase. The increase fully conforms to India's economic growth. 23-24, even though India's economy has grown further, India's crude oil import has actually come down. 2023-24, normal year, the war in Ukraine is going on, Russian crudes available, India is down to 231 million metric tons. So it hasn't gone up, it has actually declined, and it has stayed with its normal average. In 2024-25, it goes up to 244 million metric tons. Once again, if you calculate from 2019-20 and take out the pandemic year, then see 6% growth in India. The overall growth in crude imports is fully within the norm, conforming with India's economic growth. There is nothing abnormal there. So the idea that this cheap crude oil is available and India is just buying it up and refining it in a laundromat and selling it all over the world is nonsensical. But the person who's saying it also knows that it's nonsensical. Never mind the passion with which he's saying it, because that's the thing with propaganda. Because when people do propaganda, the best propagandists are those who start believing in their own lies. And that's how he comes at India as well. Then you see the other issue. India's refined petroleum exports. About half of it is diesel, aviation turbine fuel. Europe buys a lot of aviation turbine fuel from India. But remember, India, for almost 2 decades, in fact, for more than 2 decades, has been the 4th largest oil refiner in the world. India is not a small refiner. It's a fourth largest oil refiner in the world. One of India's biggest refineries, one of the Reliance refineries, is an is located in an EPZ, export processing zone. So all of its output must necessarily be exported. And that was not set up now after the Russians invaded Ukraine, or maybe a year earlier when Putin called somebody and said, देखो भाई ऐसे सुनो, मैं इन्वेट करने वाला हूँ, फिर तुमको सस्ता क्रूड मिलेगा, तुम रिफाइनरी लगा लो. Refineries are not installed like that. That refinery started functioning in 2006. 2006, 16 years before the invasion of Ukraine began. India, therefore, has always been a sizable exporter of refined petroleum goods, and increasingly developed countries, particularly in Europe, also in the US, they have reduced their refining capacity because refining is also polluting. It also has many other issues. So they've preferred to have crude refined elsewhere, and they buy finished products, refined products. So 2019-20, India's refined products export is US dollars. These figures are now in US dollars. About $41 billion. Next year it's come down. That is the COVID year, 25 billion. Then next year, 21, 22, 67 billion. 22, 23 has come to 97 billion. But that's also because globally, the economies are booming. Economies are booming. Aviation is back. Tourism is booming. Aviation turbine fuel is much in demand, and also prices are also rising year by year. $97 billion. Next year, 23-24, it's come to $84 billion, and the following year, 24-25, hello, it's down to $63.3 billion, just $63 billion. So if you start in 2019-20 and come to 24-25 and go from 41 to 63, it's not as if any extraordinary amount has been added. In fact, if you look at the prices, it is well within the inflation calculation. So all of this stuff that India is buying, these enormous amounts of cheap crude oil, black market oil, and refining it and selling for profit, it is wrong. It's factually wrong, and it's also totally improbable, in fact impossible, because how much refining capacity India has is well known. India's ability to export now has actually come down because India's domestic demand has gone up. Earlier, India exported a lot more of what it refined, but as its refining capacity has gone up over the decades, India's needs have gone up. So today, 70% of all the crude oil that is refined in India, those products are consumed in India. So India has no more surpluses besides what it's already exporting to export. So this is a fact check on Peter Navarro on oil. Now, second is about weapons. Now, second is about weaponry. He says India has been buying weapons from Russia, and when they buy from us, they say transfer sensitive technology or set up plants in India. So first of all, the data I will use for you is from CIPRI, very respected organization. They give figures on arms trade across the world, imports, exports, everything. So they say that over the past 5 years, they give you data in 5-year blocks. So in the last 5 years, that is up to 2023-24, from 2019, India's import from Russia, of all the arms imports India has made, first of all, in these 5 years, India is no longer the largest arms importer in the world. That's Ukraine. India has become the second largest in the world. That's an important shift. Second, of India's imports in these 5 years, Russia has accounted for 36%. The fact is that 10 years back, Russia accounted for 72%. So in these 5 years, the percentage of India's arms imports from Russia has halved from 72% to 36%. The second biggest supplier to India, exporter to India, is France at 33%, almost the same level as Russia. I think it will go up further now. Israel is 13% and the US is 11%. Then, if you talk about plants, the Americans have been forced to set up no plants in India. There is an agreement signed to co-produce GE 414 engines in India in the course of time. That is something that the Americans want also. There are offsets with all arms purchases India makes. There are offsets, so you have to spend a certain amount of money in India. That's how you find some of the American aviation companies are outsourcing some of their manufacture in India. The Tatas are doing some of that for Boeing, for example, and also for Dassault, for the French, to make Rafale fuselages going ahead. That's all part of this set of process, which is very normal in arms trade. India at this point, in fact, has become a net armament exporter. India may not be exporting very high-tech weaponry, but if you add up everything, India exports more than India imports. That's a big change in India. And the fact is that Russia, one, because its own requirements for weapon systems has gone up tremendously. It's gone into this very expensive war. Second, it's had dislocation of its armament manufacture. And third, its ability to create surpluses and sell has gone down. So even globally, Russia's share in the global armament trade has declined by 64%. So if it was about 17.5% of the global arms trade, today it's down to 7.8% and is further declining. If you look at India, the major systems India has bought, barring that one S400, which has not fully come in, only 3 of the 5 batteries have come in. Barring that S400, India has not bought anything major from Russia for a long time. The last 2 naval ships that they had ordered have now been delivered. Rajnath Singh said now that henceforth all ships will be made in India. India has bought no fighter aircraft, no transport aircraft, no further ships, no submarines, nothing that can be called a capital asset from Russia for a very long time. What you see coming in, or what you will see coming in, is what's been in the process for a long time. No new tanks, no new armored personnel carriers, no new missiles. Everything is either part of replacements or completion of deliveries on earlier orders. So India's purchases from Russia, if anything, are coming down. India's purchases from Western suppliers, France, number 1, Israel, America, just after Israel, but catching up because now MQ-9 drones are coming in. Those are very expensive. MH-50 helicopters have come in for the Navy, and the Army now wants more Apache helicopters. When all of them start coming in, and India has a lot of other purchase requests in process in the US, when all of that starts coming in by the end of this financial year, I think America will leave Israel way behind. At some point would be catching up, or I should rather say could be catching up with France as well. I said I shifted from would be to could be because this will all depend on the political relationship between the two countries.